looking at the blood supply, well, like I said, the only food stuff is glucose. So it's got to be glucose. Now, oxygen is important, of course, and the blood is, when we create, when we're sending the blood to the brain, the blood's going to have more than just these two major nutrients, we should say, that the brain needs. There's a lot of other stuff flying around in our blood, and a lot of it can actually be very dangerous to the brain tissue. So the brain has to protect itself. It has to really control what is coming in to these cells. So we're going to find that we have this blood barrier system that's in place. And when it says strictly regulates, it strictly regulates what's going to make it into the cells of the brain. When we're talking about this, you've probably heard of this as the blood-brain barrier. And it's more than just the BBB, okay? And we don't mean the Better Business Bureau, all right? Our blood-brain barrier. This is part of a brain barrier system that's in place. So, we need to protect the blood capillaries because that is what is bringing in the blood to the brain, and we need to make sure we protect the area of the choroid plexuses because that's the area making the cerebrospinal fluid. So, we're going to find that in the system we have the BBB, the blood-brain barrier. Now, here's the cool thing about it. We're going to find that there are tight junctions between the cells. And I'm trying to check and see if I've got a picture. And I don't think I do. Okay. So, tight junctions. Well, remember this from somewhere? And how? How did we hear that? How do we remember that? Well, think back to part 1. And this was how we talked about cells connecting. Do you guys remember that? We had like gap junctions, tight junctions, desmosomes, all that sort of stuff. Okay? So now, if it means the tight junction, well, oh yeah. All right, I am not finding what I want. That is not what I wanted. Must have been in a previous chapter. All right, so I'm guessing maybe, possibly, there we go. Are you okay, so this is from chapter 12. All right, let me see if I can pull this picture up. The lab?
Yeah. Get that from.
Y'all remember that picture? What page is that?
443.
443 in your textbooks, if you've got the little thing, textbook thing with you. Okay. This is from chapter 12. And what it's trying to show you is, even though it's a little simplified version, it is showing you some of the stuff that we've talked about. All right, so these would be those ependymal cells, the ones that are giving rise to the cerebrospinal fluid, because they're trying to show you the CSF right out here. Remember how I said they were kind of cubed with the cilia? Now, cilia, they do what? They go do this number, right? Like a woohoo, like a wave around a stadium, okay? And so in doing that, they're making that CSF move and wash over stuff. So that's kind of giving you the representation of what's giving rise. Now, one of the things that it has a close connection with are the blood capillaries. Now, a lot of times when people think about blood flow, they think about this, where we've got our heart, then we've got all the vessel system, right? When you think about, what is all over it? I don't think I want to know. Okay, so as they, this is really what people kind of think about, right? They think that maybe it's these areas that we get blood exchange. That is not the case, okay? What you see as these big areas, that's just simply the tubular system that's moving the blood, okay? It's going to be at these areas like they're trying to show right here, little capillaries, okay? That is where the site of exchange occurs. So that's telling me if I have that setup right there, then I'm going to have the areas of the sites of exchange for my blood. Well now, let me think about this for a second. If the blood is the site for bringing in the nutrients, i.e. the glucose and the oxygen, well, there's other stuff in my blood than just that. So, a lot of that other stuff that's in the blood can be dangerous to the brain tissue. So, the structure that we have for the brain tissue, these cells, well, we know that we're going to have our neurons, okay? Neurons with their dendrites and their axons, but then I've got all of this other stuff, okay, that's existing around them. And then I've got my blood supply, and I've got something out here, and it's kind of sticking to my blood supply, okay? These other cells are termed the glial cells. These are the support cells. So, let's look at the one that is mentioned right here, the astrocyte, okay? And I always think of the Jetsons and their dog Astro, you know? But look at that cell being represented right here. This is a support cell. Now look at what it does. It has these extensions, some of them moving out to the blood capillary, some of them attached to the neuron. So here's what they do. Got the astrocyte like this. Over here, my blood capillary. Over here, a neuron. Some of the blood tissue, brain tissue. Now, if I have this structure right here, blood's flowing through here, I only need a couple of things. So now, what do you think that astrocyte's going to be able to do before we get connection to the actual neuron, the tissue? What's that astrocyte going to be able to do?
It blocks what's coming through.
We're going to have a filtration. So, by having that astrocyte have an extension sticking, wrapping around the capillary and an extension touching the neuron, I now have a way for filtration to occur. Because something would need to pass through this astrocyte before we could get to the neuron. And if the astrocyte's job is to be a support cell, it's not going to let that happen. Does that make sense? So, even though we've got this blood supply, it is controlled. And this is making up what we know of as the BBB, being a part of the BBS. Go figure. Okay? So we're controlling those substances.
Through the astrocyte?
Through those support cells. Astrocytes are a big one because they have the connection to that blood supply and an actual neuron.
So, based on that theory, is that's why it makes it difficult to treat brain issues?
Yes. When there is a, like for example, a brain infection, okay? Now note my terminology. Not meningeal infection. A brain infection. It is extremely difficult to treat. Chances are it's going to end up in death, okay? Or it's going to end up in severe damage to whatever area of the brain that got infected. Because antibiotics, to my knowledge, there's only one, and it's a last resort that will affect a brain infection at all. And even at that, it's very minimal amounts. Okay? Found that out because about 3 years ago, well, probably about 2.5, my mom ended up with a brain infection. Almost died. Ended up at UVA. And it took over 6 months for the treatment. Yeah, she has permanent damage from it. Have no clue where it came from, what caused it, or anything. I mean, it was horrible. And so it's very difficult medications like psychotropic drugs, ones that are used to, treat different disorders, okay? They have actually been created to be able to cross a lipid barrier. Think about this. I'm at my cellular level because capillaries are one cell layer thick. I'm at my cellular level of the astrocyte. I am at the cellular level of a neuron. The cell's membrane is the phospholipid bilayer. Remember how I told you everything comes down to the plasma membrane. So a medication that is needed to treat, for example, depression, okay, it has to be able to cross through the plasma membrane of the capillary, of the astrocyte, of the neuron. And once it does that, it can move into this cell and affect the product that it makes.
So you said just so I understand the astrocyte, it works as a filtration system?
Yeah, it'll help control what gets to move in and out.
Okay.
Sorry, it's the astrocytes